Sorry, I need to get closer. And we will focus on 1 Samuel chapter 24. 1 Samuel 24, and this story is talking about Saul and David. But before we reach into this chapter 24, let's have the background of this chapter. You know, there are dynamics between the life of Saul as the king of Israel and David as the future king of Israel. And of course, we are familiar with the history or the story when David killed Goliath, right? Children, do you remember this one? Yes. When David became the hero of the Israel. And what happened was, David, in front of the people's eyes, including the king Saul, and all his mighty men, David killed himself, the giant Goliath. He didn't need the troops. He did not need any military forces. He did not need any political efforts. Can you imagine? In front of the people's eyes. It's like in the arena. If you see boxing or whatever, sumo, one by one battle, and one by a person that is actually underestimated, people will cheer up and people will be shocked. And that's what happened when David killed Goliath. As a result, David married Saul's daughter. Do you know that? David married Saul's daughter by the name Michal. Michal is Saul's daughter, and as a result of killing Goliath, Michal became the bridge between Saul and David. And David suddenly is part of the inner circle of Saul. He is the close person to Saul. Not only that, he was also a closest friend or bestie in today's term. Bestie. Have you heard of that? Bestie. The best friend of David is Jonathan. However, despite of this relationship, David and Saul had a very intense rivalry. And it was developed between him and this young general because of the jealousy. Because people tend to support David rather than Saul. And you know, Saul is actually taller than David. One of the reasons why Saul was chosen as king, because he was taller than anyone else in Israel. There was the first requirement or first thing that the Israelites consider to choose a king. Fast backward, just for a little background, before we reach chapter 24. After the killing of Goliath, this shepherd, David, promoted to be the high-ranking position of Saul's army. He was also the son-in-law of Saul. Besides being the son-in-law and also closest friend of Saul's son Jonathan, this chapter 18 verses 7 to 8 is one of the main causes why David became the most hateful enemy or most hated enemy of Saul. Let's read 1 Samuel 18, 7 to 8, and we will go back to chapter 24. 1 Samuel 18, 7 to 8. The woman. This is the power of woman, right? We have the empowerment. So, take a look on this text. The women sang as they played and said, Saul has slain 1,000. But what happened to David? David, his 10,000s. You know, women love to compare. This king, you know, he has killed thousands. But this new appointed king, unofficially, killed more than thousands. In Indonesia, it says, berlaksa-laksa. Thousands of thousands. Then Saul became angry, for this saying displeased him. And what happened when the women started to cheer, but the guy, the king, started to get angry. They have ascribed to David 10,000s, but to me they have ascribed thousands. Now what more can he have but the kingdom? Saul started to realize that his position is no longer safe. Saul started to realize that David wanted to enthrone him, wanted to have the coup d'etat. Fast forward, Saul sends his mighty men to kill David. David escapes to flee to Samuel. Because in the first time, David was anointed by Samuel, but Samuel did not announce it yet. It's very interesting, you see how God played with authority and position. By de facto, who was the king? Saul. But by de jure, David was the king. Because Samuel came all the way to Jesse's house, to the father of David, and then he anointed David. Not Jesse, Isai. Jesse, right? In English, Jesse, yeah. So when David had this understanding, he could have done it, right? He could have gone to the throne and then, hey, I'm the king, I'm the chosen one. Saul pursues David, but God prevents him. David appeals to the son of Saul, Jonathan. But Saul almost killed Jonathan, and he warns David of Saul's intent to kill him. Up to this point, Saul even killed his own son because of the hatred toward David. Not only that, David flees to the sanctuary, to God's place, God's house at Nob. And then he sought for some food in the priest's place. And Ahimelech gives David shewbread to eat, and David at the time became the refugee. This is already multiple times that David wanted to flee away from Saul. And what happened is, he hides from Saul. He hides from the best friend, Jonathan. Now he hides from the priest. And what happened is that he hides from the king Saul after so many people behind him until the desert Paran. And he is forced to leave to fight the Philistines. First, he went to his best friend. Second, he went to the priests, God's representatives, God's chosen ones. The third time, he went to the enemies. Can you see the increasing situation, the hot temper of Saul getting increased, and the more Saul becomes angry, the more David seeks for refuge. And he could not find that refuge in his best friend, which is Saul's son, in God's sanctuary, and now he is in the hands of enemies. There is no other way out. Now we reach chapter 24. Let's begin verse 1. 1 Samuel 24, verse 1. If you have your Bible, I do not put it on the screen, but let's read it together. I'm reading in NASB. Now when Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, which is the enemies of Israel, and where Goliath came from? Philistines. Thank you, children. He was told, saying, behold, David is in the wilderness. So the most wanted person Saul is looking for is already in front of his eyes. This is the place that he is heading to. Verse 2. Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men. Can you imagine? 3,000 chosen men from all Israel and went to seek David and his men in front of the rocks of the wild goats. He came to the sheepfolds. Verse 3. This is the interesting part. He came to the sheepfolds on the way where there was a cave. Brothers and sisters, maybe in Jakarta there is no cave. Do we have cave here? Maybe there is a cave, but it's what is that? It's a man creation. Yes, a man-created cave. Yeah, it's not a natural cave. And when there is a cave, do you know what Saul does? Saul went in to relieve himself. When I look at this part, I was wondering what is in the various translations say. In ESV, it says, where there was a cave, Saul went in to relieve himself. In Tagalog, I'm not sure if I get the correct one, but please, it says, at pumasok si Saul upang takpan ang kaniyang mga paa. Is it right? No. It doesn't say like that. Oh, okay. So I need to find another one then. This is in Indonesia. I don't have to translate it, okay? You can understand it yourself. Whatever happened inside the cave, for the fact of the matter is, Saul went in to attend for his needs. Am I right? Because some translation says he is sleeping. Some say that he is making sure his shoes or something like that. So he has to prepare something that his troops or his men cannot get inside, cannot enter the cave with him. So whatever this guy is doing inside the cave, he needs to attend his needs. And he went there alone. Verse 3 opened the Pandora box. Because this is the first time that David and Saul is just by few meters away. Verse 4. The men of David say to him, behold, this is the day of which the Lord has given you. Behold, I am about to give your enemy into your hand, and you shall do to him as it seems good to you. Then David arose and cut off the edge of Saul's robe secretly. It came about afterward that David's conscience bothered him because he had cut off the edge of Saul's robe. So he said to his men, far be it from me because of the Lord that I should do this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed. To stretch out my hand against him, since he is the Lord's anointed. David's men were very excited. So you see, not only Saul who got his man, but David also got his man. And David was hiding in the same cave where Saul is trying to relieve himself. But Saul is not aware at all of the presence of David and his men. David's men were very excited. This opportunity, they believe, is a gift of God to kill Saul. You know, when we think about the truth, sometimes we do not say a truth. We say a justification. We want to justify the evil in order for us to reach the truth. We say, oh, killing is okay because Saul is evil. You see? Killing terrorists is acceptable because they are terrorists. Killing those you hate so much is permissible because that person is worthy to be hated. And this kind of logic is very tricky, yet dangerous. What happened to David is that they might have thought that God delivered Saul into David's hand. But what happened was that God wanted to exercise David's faith and his passions. If David took the shortcuts, the story will have been different. The blood in David's hands will never be paid off. There are three reasons why David did not kill Saul, and I like these points because it can help us to apply it into our daily context. When we have faith and passions all together in this kind of crisis, and when we are about to take the shortcuts, please consider and contemplate these points. First one, David did not take shortcuts by killing Saul, and by doing that, it helps him a lot to be the king of Israel. Why he did not do so? First, it was because he respected his authority over him as the king and as the father-in-law. It is not only about political matters, brothers and sisters. It is also about biological matters. Saul is the father-in-law of David, and David is the son-in-law of Saul. I'm talking to the man now. What is the difference between you talking to your father-in-law and you talking to your father? A lot of difference. I remember when I wanted to propose my wife, I behaved very nicely. I had to do so in order to gain the ticket, right? And thankfully, my father-in-law is also a pastor. So it helps a lot. But what will you think if I do not behave well? I will just go whatever I want. Hey, I want to marry your daughter. Things will not work out. So David put himself not only as the higher rank of the military service in Israel, but also because of his relationship between him and Saul as son and father-in-law. So because of this respect, if you notice in verse 8, 1 Samuel 24:8, I did not add more things, but let's look at what the text says. David arose and went out the cave and called after Saul. What does he say? My Lord the king. He could have said, hey Saul, look at me, right? Without any respect or salute, or maybe David could have done it. But David, in a good manner, he said, my Lord, my king. And when David said that, Saul looked at him, and David bowed with his face to the ground and prostrated himself. David showed that this is the age of his role. In the army, they have a saying like this: you do not salute the man, you salute the rank. That's what happened to Baradae, right? Baradae and the general. You do not salute the man, you salute the rank. And David salute by the virtue of Saul's position. He knows that what Saul has done is sinful, is away from the Lord's will. But David owed Saul his respect by virtue because he is the king. Number 2. You can see how David is submissive enough not only to Saul but to God. Yes, he respects Saul, but he also realizes that Saul is a man, is a person, is human. He could do bad things. But he wants to submit to Saul in order for him to get the Lord's will. And in this case, David did not take the shortcuts. He could have just slain Saul, tap him at the back and that's it. No one will know. And they will just flee away and Saul's men will find out the corpse. But David did not do that. After God's authority, in control of Saul's authority, this might be one of the reasons why David did not take the shortcuts. It says he did not want to descend to Saul's level. Don't get this wrong, brothers and sisters. Yes, we know that Saul is the king, but this man is very dangerous and very tricky because David could have been trapped by his schemes, by his scenario. A person by the name George Bernard Shaw is an Irish writer. He says like this: never wrestle with pigs. You both get dirty and the pig likes it. So who will consider which one is the pig, Saul or David? No one will consider that, okay? But when you encounter a person like Saul, we should not get dirty just because of our hatred to one another. That's what Saul could have done it to David in the first place. And David chose not to descend to Saul's level because he has this faithful stronghold. Psalm 18:35. This is the song, this is the cry of David when he is becoming fugitive. Psalm 18:36. I like 35 and 36. I like this psalm because there are several psalms David writes when he pretended to be insane, when he was under the army of Philistines. But this is one of the psalms that he said about his fugitive status or being a refugee. Verse 35. You have also given me the shield of your salvation, and your right hand upholds me, and your gentleness makes me great. David realized that his shelter, his security, his salvation does not lie in the man, does not lie in his own troops, does not lie with his ability to kill Goliath. He realizes that his security, his secure place is in God's hands. So when we encounter difficult people in this life, brothers and sisters, let's remember this faithful stronghold. David continually acknowledged his father, not only father-in-law, but his heavenly father, and his ultimate presence to let justice work things out for him and Israel. Can you imagine? Saul is to murder David, but he is not, or David is not murdered by Saul. Not at all. Never. Saul is always trying to murder David, but David is never murdered by Saul. God's people do not need to take the shortcuts. I'm saying that your shortcuts should be defined by yourself. But in this context, the shortcuts, they may lead you to higher position, higher income, higher things that you will comfort or you will enjoy for. Those things may not necessarily give you the salvation. Those things may not give you necessarily the comfort or the satisfaction. 1 Peter 5:6-7. Why the shortcuts may not always be fulfilling in this life. And Peter reminds us in this way. 1 Peter 5:6-7.
You, younger men, be subject to your elders. And all of you, clothe yourself with humility toward one another. But for God is opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that He may exalt you in the proper time. David knows his time is yet to come. David knows that his time will come when God will do so. Most of the times we try to help God, right? Most of the times we try to aid God just a little centimeters. God, please make sure that you want us to receive this. Please make sure that I can achieve what this salary can be given, or what this position will be granted to me. These things will come to the place when God is willing to do it. And David realizes that in this short time. Let me end with this man, John Nevins Andrews. The same name like Nineta's father, Nevins. John Nevins Andrews. Do you know this guy? The predicate of John Nevin Andrews is that he is the ablest man in our ranks. And he is the first official missionary for the church. The first official missionary for the church who was sent to Europe. There was an official missionary, but he is the first official missionary. In 1874, John Nevins Andrews is sent to the Europe. Maybe when we read, oh, he's the smartest, ablest, and greatest man in the church. But what happened was, at the age of 25, he wrote a very prominent letter or prominent book. And he wrote that paper for the church, the whole wide church. At the age of 38, he became the third president of General Conference of this church. He could memorize the Old Testament, the New Testament. He is fluent in English, French, and German. And just a few months after he was sent or sailed for the missionary work, his wife died 2 years before the assignment. She got pneumonia and even tuberculosis in Europe. You know what does he eat? He ate bread, potatoes, cabbage, fruits, milk, and butters. No fancy food, no fancy house, no fancy things. What is the point? I'm not saying that we should eat what Andrews ate at that time. But there is a big difference between sacrificing and earning. Don't take the shortcuts. What if our sacrifice will worth more than our earning? How about when we sacrifice some, we will earn more in the future? What if our shortcuts not only lead us to the better life, but lead us to the eternal life? How about if our shortcuts will lead us not into the things that God will prepare for us? In our spiritual cave, let's remember that this life, like David, is full of trust to God. David trusted Him, and eventually God sorted things out. In the end, Saul was the one who was dead. And David became the king. And David's strategy is very powerful. I quoted this from Glenn Townend. He's a pastor, and he said like this: even when his life was in absolute danger, he had no refuge at all. He only has God. David went to Jonathan. David went to the church or sanctuary at the time. David went to the enemies. He could not get any safety and security. Even in the absolute danger, David found his coping power, his coping strategy. And this is very psychological. You know, in our mind, the battle is happening, but we try to find refuge where we can be safe. He found that coping strategy. And this coping power, he could overcome it with the strength in his private prayer life with God and dependence upon God's ultimate vindication and justice. For that reason, brothers and sisters, don't take the shortcuts. God will reward us one day in the world to come as we experience our spiritual cave in this world. And may the Lord bless each and every one of us. Perhaps you are not into the real cave, but when you are in the workplace, when you are in your family, when you are in this church even, you may experience that cave. When things get so dark, when things get so uncertain, when things get so blurry in this world, let's find God. Let's find Him and have Him as our faithful stronghold that can rescue us and even save us from this world. May the Lord bless us. Amen.
Semoga Anda diberkati dengan tayangan video yang baru saja Anda saksikan. Dan jangan lupa untuk like, komen, serta subscribe tayangan video ini. Share juga kepada saudara-saudari lainnya, sehingga lebih banyak lagi jiwa-jiwa yang akan mendapatkan pengalaman bersama dengan Kristus dan juga memperoleh berkat yang datangnya dari sorga. Kiranya Tuhan memberkati kita.